Marcus Morris and Landry Shamet are both New York Knicks, but what does this mean for the last roster spot? Did the Knicks just open up a cage match for their final spot on the team? I'll talk about it right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Today's episode is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us a part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And today I'm talking through the two new signings, which maybe if you saw this news over the weekend, it confused you a little bit because you might have said, I thought the Knicks already filled their roster or mostly filled their roster. And then you saw the first news break and you go, well, there you go. There it is. And then you see the second news break and you go, wait, I thought that last one, I don't understand. All right, so let me explain. So the New York Knicks a few weeks ago signed Chumo KK to an Exhibit 10 deal. And then over this past weekend, you might have seen, oh, the Knicks signed Landry Shamet. And you go, wow, all right, cool. Well, I thought that Chumo KK was roster spot number 15 based off how things went, but maybe you looked into what an Exhibit 10 deal is, which I'll explain in just a second, and realized, oh, well, that last spot is sort of in flux. Okay. So then they sign Landry Shamet, and you go, well, that's a quality NBA player. I doubt this is an Exhibit 10 deal where he might be G League bound or whatever. So I assume that they probably just finished filling their roster. And then you see Marcus Morris signs with the Knicks, and you go, wait, that's another quality NBA player. What's going on here? Why are both these guys able to sign when the Knicks only had one roster spot available? Because if you were keeping track at home, after they re-signed Precious Achiuwa, the Knicks were at 14 out of 15 guaranteed roster spots. The way that the NBA roster breaks down, just as a refresher course, is that you get 15 uh, full-time roster spots and you get 3 two-way spots, and the two-way spots don't count monetarily or roster size wise towards your overall roster total, but then come with the caveat of those players are only allowed to play so much time and have so much practice time with the big club. It's gotten more loose over the years. It used to be really strict with the two-way deals where guys had to you had to like log every time they practice and everything else. And service time with the big club was only allowed to be like 45 days, I think. Now it's a little more lax. I'm honestly not even totally sure where the rules stand at this point. I think it mostly is just on games played, less so the practice time element. But either way, so to get back to Shamit and Morris, what's going on with these guys? So Landry Shamet and Marcus Morris both signed what's called Exhibit 9 deals. So Exhibit 9 basically means it's a training camp deal. So they signed for the veterans minimum, and basically that deal becomes vested at the beginning of the regular season. So if at any point during training camp or the preseason, the Knicks say, okay, we're not going to ultimately bring Landry Shamet or Marcus Morris onto the full roster, they're able to cut them without incurring a cap hit and without incurring their full salary for this coming year, which would be a veteran's minimum. Now, you also might be wondering, we spent all summer talking about the salary cap and the aprons and everything else. And, you might remember that when the Knicks made the Mikal Bridges trade, they ultimately sent out Shake Milton in a sign and trade, which was able to push them over the threshold of, outgoing money along with Bojan Bogdanovic to get back Mikal Bridges and Keita Bates-Diop and get them back and allow the Knicks, instead of being capped at the first apron, to be capped at the second apron. So once that happened, they had I think it was about 13 or 14 million in salary cap space that they were able to use, or in apron space, I guess, or hard cap space that they were able to use, I should say, which would include like everything. That's like all inclusive. That means that they lost their veterans minimum exception, which is normally a thing in the NBA where you can sign as many guys as you want for the veterans minimum for forever, as long as it, well, there's not even an as long as. It used to just be you could sign those contracts forever, no matter how far it took you over the cap. It only would mean that you spent more luxury tax dollars. Now there's, for the Knicks this year, actually a cap at that second apron, which, don't have the exact number in front of me. It's about 190 million roughly, that they're not able to go over that number at all, period, now, with their total salary for the year. Like they're hard capped there. Um, so it would restrict them from making too many like swap outs of that 15th spot, and doing that. So that's sort of the nuts and bolts of this, right? So Shamit and Morris are unguaranteed. They can be cut, up until the end of preseason and not incur a cap hit. Chuma Okeke, it's one step further. I think the Knicks, and I'll get into it in a second, but they probably don't view him as a real roster consideration based off of the deal that they put him on. So they gave him an Exhibit 10 deal, which is a type of deal that they will probably cycle a bunch of players through. With that, you get like I think 5 extra roster spots during camp or something to have players on non-guaranteed contracts to then whittle your roster down. And so I would assume that they will probably sign guys like Dwayne Washington, maybe Charlie Brown again, um, perhaps Dimitrios Kapintsev if he hasn't signed with another team. Though I thought he made a pretty solid showing in summer league to maybe earn a deal somewhere else. But they'll probably try to sign some of these guys just for like a day or so, maybe have them appear in one preseason game just to get some reps in, and then immediately cut them. Sometimes they even cut guys in the same day, or within 12 hours or so of inking one of these Exhibit 10 deals, because what that allows them to do then on Exhibit 10 training camp deals, you can sign a guy, have him come into camp for like a day or two or a week or multiple weeks or whatever. And then if you cut them before the season, then you can sign them for more money at the G League level. So it allows you to pay them. I don't know if it's gone up as the salary cap has gone up. I hope so. And also, I think the G League officially became recognized as part of the players union recently as well. But it used to allow you to move players up from like getting paid like $40,000 a year, to like 100,000 a year, to play, minor league NBA basketball, which I would hope would be what they'd be able to get, considering, the players at the big league level make millions upon millions. And, I think that the big clubs can afford to pay their minor leaguers that much. So the Knicks generally take care of their minor leaguers pretty well. I think that's probably where Chuma Okeke is headed, because he signed that Exhibit 10 deal rather than the Exhibit 9 deal that Marcus Morris and Landry Shamet signed. What happened to Exhibits 1 through 8? That I'm not totally sure, but maybe I can look into it at some point. But yeah, so the Knicks now technically have 17 guys under normal contracts going into camp. Again, Kevin McCullough, Ariel Hookporty, and Jacob Toppin don't count against the roster thanks to being on two-way deals. So the Knicks roster as it stands right now, at guard, you have Jalen Brunson, Deuce McBride, Tyler Kolek, Cam Payne, Mikhail Bridges, Dante DiVincenzo, and Landry Shamet. Then at forward, you have OG Anunoby, Julius Randle, Josh Hart, Pacome Dadier, Keita Bates-Diop, Marcus Morris, and Chumo KK. And then at center, you have Mitchell Robinson, Precious Achua, and Jericho Sims. So how is this throwdown for this final spot going to go? Well, I'll get into that in just a sec in the next segment, and start talking through how I think this thing is going to go, and how these final roster spots will probably be determined by the Knicks. But first, I got to let you know about our friends over at Gametime. And my ad copy here says, talk about how much you love going to live events, no matter what kind. Share a fond memory of an event, sports, music, theater, comedy you attended in the past, or where you're looking forward to making new memories this year. Well, I've made all kinds of great live event memories. I love live events, whether it's sports, whether it's music, whatever. I just went last night and saw one of my favorite bands ever, Linkin Park, in their reunion. little different than they used to be. Obviously, tragedy struck that band 7 years ago, but they came back. Full disclosure, I did not get those tickets on Game Time. You had to get in a little early on that one, but I am going to a Mets game tomorrow, my second Mets game in the last couple weeks, and both of those I have gotten off Game Time. And let me tell you guys, the deals are crazy. I mean, it makes you almost feel nuts for buying tickets when they first come out because the deals end up being so good on Game Time. And Game Time now has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And I've used that a bunch. I got so it's me and two friends, so kind of a weird number. I needed 3 tickets, so I sorted by 3 tickets and then just look through the best deals, and Game Time will sort them easily for you in multiple ways, either on a map view or on just the side scroll view to be able to see what the best tickets are in the building. We got into City Field for I think $35 a person for like second or third row back seats in the second level. I thought it was great seats. I think it's going to be a really fun time, really great view of the game. So if you want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets, use Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, and I'm back in to keep talking through this conundrum that the Knicks have put themselves into, right? Because you thought based off the signings, maybe that Chuma Okeke was the guy, certainly that Landry Shamet was the guy, and now maybe that Marcus Morris was the guy to fill that final roster spot. I think ultimately what we're looking at now as far as the roster goes and as far as how this whole thing is going to go down is probably, and maybe I'll end up being wrong here, maybe it'll be a surprise in this little competition, but I think we've probably got a 5-man race for 3 spots on the roster. So nothing too crazy. It's not like the Knicks are going to have to, unless of course they sign another veteran to a deal, in which case I think I think things will start getting pretty interesting in camp, and I, I I wonder just how contentious things might get if they add another, relatively big name veteran role player to this mix and say, "All right, you're also fighting for one of the final spots on this team." But I think it's a 5-man race right now. I think it's Jericho Sims, Keita Bates-Diop, Marcus Morris, Landry Shamet, and Chuma Okeke that are fighting for 3 spots. So you're gonna have to cut 2 of these guys. I think pretty easily, and I mean maybe I'm giving him too little. I can't decide if I'm giving him too little or too much credit here. But I think ultimately Okeke is probably the one where I feel most resolute in saying, okay, maybe it's not even a 5-man race, maybe it's just a 4-man race. It feels like he's the least likely to make the team to me. I think that he is the least complete product out of these guys, and I think that it's pretty obvious based off the Shamit and Morris, signings or the look that they're giving them that they saw what happened last year in the playoffs and down the stretch of the season. They saw how they were, the Knicks did, how they were treating their end of bench spots, which I don't want to say it was just like favors, but clearly they didn't have real NBA talent all the way out to 15 on their roster. I don't think it's arguable that like Dwayne Washington Jr. or Charlie Brown or Mamadi Diakite are not really high level NBA prospects, and not certainly not veteran depth that you would feel comfortable going to in like a mid to late season game that matters if you're dealing with some injuries or certainly in the playoffs, if you're dealing with some injuries, which is why ultimately, we saw that Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, guys like that were having to pick up the slack and play like 48 minutes at times down the stretch of the season because there just wasn't enough NBA talent on the end of the bench. So, Okeke, I don't know that he really fits that bill of a guy that is NBA ready, ready to hop right in and, you know, potentially be, a guy that could play minutes if you need him to. If the, injury bug strikes again, or if Julius Randle slash Mitchell Robinson aren't ready to go at the beginning of the season, or, whatever, like there is reports that they possibly, will have to be out for the first week or two, as they continue rehabbing their offseason surgeries. So I don't think Okeke is the guy that you look at and say he's ready to step in. Like, he's regressed every single year in the NBA so far. I spoke with Philip Rossman-Reich about him after the Knicks signed him to that Exhibit 10 deal. So, of course, like, go back and listen to that episode if you want some perspective on that. But, I think he's just not, he's fallen off a bit from where he was. I think that he was given a longer leash on a team that didn't have much to play for early on in his Magic, years there, and then lost playing time over time as the team got better, and that's generally not a great sign. If you're a player that is part of a young core and then, is trying to grow with the team, and then you're the one that's losing footing as the team is getting better. It speaks to, I think, just the inconsistency with his shot. Um, the fact that he just doesn't have super high level NBA skills, probably hurt him there. So, I mean, I think that the Knicks maybe see something in him, which is why they felt the need to even go out on a limb and put him on the Exhibit 10 deal. But I think that ultimately they're probably looking to cut him and sign him to the Westchester Knicks. So I should also note, for someone who's still kind of getting by on like potential too, he is 26. So he's not exactly a spring chicken. And, he's basically the same age as pretty much everyone on this list except for Marcus Morris. So, it's not even like he's got this crazy high potential. It's like, oh, he just got off his rookie deal, but he's only 22 or 23 years old. Like, he's 26 already, should be entering his prime, and yet seems to have just kind of dipped throughout his NBA career. So I think it's pretty likely that he gets cut. So now let's actually whittle it down. I think now it's a 4-person race for 3 spots, and I I can't really decide what the primary competition is here, but I think it probably comes down to KBD and Marcus Morris. I think it's those two because they play the most similar position, right? They're both that sort of stretchy forward. I think that Landry Shamet is more of a guard. I think that he's sort of the insurance that you have in place for, like, okay, what happens if well, I don't know. I feel like you can't even speculate about this because he's literally never missed a game. But, like, what happens if Mikal Bridges has to miss a game? Though, again, you can't really speculate on that because it seems like he literally hasn't missed a game since like high school. So maybe not even worth speculating about. But what happens if Dante DiVincenzo has to miss a game or 2 or 3? You know what I mean? Like, if he has to miss a little bit of time, Shamet, I think, is a guy that they look at and say, well, that's another really high level 3-point shooter that we can slot in there if we have an injury to one of those guys, and someone who's bigger, more, ready to be like that 2 guard than like a campaign, than a Tyler Kolek, obviously, who's undersized even for a point guard. Um, you know, could go out there with the Deuce McBride and, provide the extra length on defense, because Shamet, he's not huge, but he's got a good wingspan. I want to say he's listed at like 6'4" or 6'5", something like that. Maybe it's even more. I actually kind of want to look that up now because now I'm just a little curious. So let's take a look in real time what Landry Shamet's height is. He is listed at 6'4". Wow, I nailed it. My memory is great. So yeah, he's 6'4", has a pretty solid wingspan, which I think will lend to, him getting that sort of extra guard slash small wing spot. And Jericho Sims, initially when I started making this list, I was sort of thinking like, oh, it might be like Sims and KBD on the bubble. But the more that I think about it, I don't think so. Just because if you look at the depth chart, like, as far as pure centers go, and I mean, you can argue maybe that Sims isn't the most pure of pure centers because he's not like the best rim protector, but he does get good rebounds. He's good at getting rebounds. He's good, as a switchy defender at times. And actually, when I did this season preview on him recently, when I did this sort of end to bench guys, which included KBD as well, so go back and listen to that episode too if you haven't. But I did notice, like, his rim defense numbers are better than you might think. So, I mean, maybe he's sort of turned a corner there too. Um, tough to totally say, but I think that just based off the lack of depth and the fact that the Knicks have not shook a center loose anywhere, which maybe that they're still holding on to that taxpayer mid-level exception, and I think have enough room. Well, especially if they cut Shamet or Morris, they definitely have enough room under that apron to still use that taxpayer mid-level exception. So maybe they're waiting to see if like another center shakes loose to work something out there. But I think short of that happening, I just don't see Sims it getting cut at this point, just because I think that Tibbs, especially if Mitch's health is a little precarious going into the season, I think he's going to want to have both Precious Achua and Jericho Sims. And for as much as I think that Tibbs should look to go small some, I don't blame him if he would put his foot down and want those guys to be on the team going into the season. So I think it basically just comes down to Marcus Morris and Keita Bates-Diop then at this point. So let's come back in just a second and talk through that and the sort of machinations between those two and who kind of gets the advantage there and who I think will ultimately end up claiming that final 15th full-time roster spot. But first, I got to let you know about our good friends over at FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And I'm checking out FanDuel odds, and I keep looking at the Knicks championship odds, and they're adding what feels like championship depth now. They're trying to really make a run this year, and they're currently the fourth favorite. Well, I guess tied for third favorite in the entire NBA to win the championship right now, tied with Philly at +900. Not the most robust odds ever to win the championship, but I mean, considering the Celtics are +300, the OKC is +700. I mean, it's and like Denver Nuggets are +1100. Same with the Mavericks. Same with the Timberwolves. I mean, that's pretty solid. They're being pretty well regarded here, but still, +900 is nice for if you throw like a little $5 bet down, could potentially give you an extra reason to be happy at the end of the season if the Knicks end up hoisting the championship trophy. Always nice to have as many reasons to be happy about your team as possible. So just visit fanduel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, so let's talk through Keita Bates-Diop versus Marcus Morris. So I think those are the two guys most likely to be in a true competition here. So KBD came over in the Mikal Bridges trade. Again, I did do a season preview for him already because I thought it was kind of locked in that he was going to be on the team. If I'm being honest, it seemed like he was sort of a low key throw in by the Knicks there in the Bridges deal to kind of sweeten things up and give them another NBA caliber body on the team. I think that he's put together some decent years in his career. His best year or years came in San Antonio. Um, things have fallen off slightly for him, like last year with Phoenix and with Brooklyn, not quite as good as he was in San Antonio the years prior. So maybe there's just a little bit of a fall off there. You could say something somewhat similar for Marcus Morris though as well, where he was he was on the Clippers the last few years after getting traded from the Knicks, had some really solid years. Goes to Philly last year, was just okay, and then ends up. I think he was ultimately traded at the deadline and then waived. I think it was San Antonio, and then he ends up on the Cavs to end the season. But I think still clearly an NBA caliber player. I mean, he shot 40% from three last year, which is fantastic. I think that he was put into a role where he had to be less of a offensive hub off the bench, sort of. With the Clippers, he was sort of tasked a lot of times, I think, with filling Paul George's shoes or whatever, playing like a similar role where he would, come in and have to handle the ball a decent amount, create his own shot, stuff that he was doing with the Knicks, the year that he got traded to the Clippers, that ultimately made him into an attractive enough piece that in the end, snowballed and got the Knicks OG Anunoby because that was where they drafted Emmanuel Quickly, who then obviously gets traded as part of the package for Anunoby, and that was sort of the move that has made us start thinking about the Knicks as possible title contenders here. So the Knicks really they owe Morris quite a bit. Maybe that alone is enough to give him this contract and say, "Man, we really appreciate what you did for us back a number of years ago, giving us that pick that turned into Emmanuel Quickly." Um, but ultimately, I just feel like he's more of an NBA player at this point than KBD is, at least as far as how he could be useful for the Knicks. Like the main thing with both these guys is that they're sort of tweeners, like they're small fours, like big threes. So it's sort of like one of those deals where I don't think that either of them pushes the needle really for the Knicks as far as being able to go small. Like I can't really see a world where like they would run out a KBD or Morris with OG lineup or a KBD or Morris with Julius Randle lineup because I just think with OG you're sacrificing too much on rebounding because OG just isn't a fantastic rebounder, and neither are either of these guys in Morris or KBD. Like they both carry rebound percentage of under 10%, which is like fine for the position that they play, but ultimately not elite or anything, which I think Tibbs is going to need like I think part of why OG and Randall could potentially work is that Tibbs gets his rim protection from OG and his interior defense and then gets his elite rebounding from Julius Randall. So I think that it'll, even out enough that he might feel comfortable going to that lineup a little bit. I don't think that's the case if you're throwing either one of those two guys out there with a Marcus Morris or with a KBD. And so, yeah, I think that it just then comes down to is Morris just straight up better than KBD? And that answer I think is yes. I mean, obviously he's older, like a decent deal older. I think that KBD is like 27 this year. I'm gonna fact check myself again just to make sure I don't mess that one up. But he's actually 28 and he's gonna turn 29 during the season. So I mean, not exactly a spring chicken either. But Morris is 34 years old now. So the best years of his career are probably behind him. But I think that when you look at what he can still bring to the table as far as scoring and as far as being able to give you like a facsimile of like a Julius Randle, type player on offense, which we saw, I mean, we sort of saw that play out in 2019 to 20, right? Like those two were so similar. And even though Randle was more the like prized free agent acquisition that year, Morris like kind of took over and was the number one scorer on that team. But those two sort of occupied the same spaces, a decent amount of time and whatever. And, were it seemed to be, I don't want to say butting heads, but almost fighting for that number one spot on the team, which Morris sort of won out and then ultimately got traded because he was playing so well that year and shooting like 43% from three and everything else. But that 40% 3-point shooting is still there. And I think that's going to be a part of what keeps him around, that consistent 3-point shooting, the defense that he can still offer, which I think has diminished a bit over the last few years just with age. That lateral quickness starts to go away and whatever, but ultimately still a pretty solid defender. He has, to use the cliche, he's got that dog in him. I think that he's a good player that plays hard, and that's what the Knicks love. I think the Tibbs will really like him. Funny enough, Tibbs never got to coach him when he was with the Knicks the last time because he was unfortunately part of the Fizdale regime, and which was not fun. And played, RJ Barrett's rookie year and Julius Randle's first year with the team, whatever, and then played a little bit with Mike Miller, I think, before getting traded. So there's something there, I think, where he would be a really good Tibbs player and give them what they're looking for there. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I think if I'm making the cuts, I think it comes down to KK and KBD are going to get cut. And you end up with Marcus Morris, Landry Shamet, and Jericho Sims taking up those final three roster spots. Now, the Knicks could throw another wrench in this plan and sign another, established veteran to an Exhibit 9 deal. And then, yeah, I feel like if they're going to do one more of those, it would end up being a center of some sort. Or they would use that taxpayer mid-level exception, which again, they still have like uh, I think about 5 million, maybe just over, just under $5 million chunk of change to throw around. That if someone shakes loose and gets cut during training camp or whatever, and they want to sign someone to that taxpayer mid-level exception, they can do that and still stay under that second apron. Even if I think if they make one cut on a guaranteed person, such as KBD cutting him, in his like 2 million or so salary, they should still have enough room to then, keep Marcus Morris, keep Landry Shamet, keep Jericho Sims, whatever, and then or cut Jericho Sims, I guess, at that point, and then sign someone to that $5 million exception. I think it would come really close. They would probably have to like cut it razor thin with that second apron, but I think they could pull it off because they only signed Precious Achua to that $5 million deal, which was not a ton, and then that gave them that flexibility. So um, we'll see how it goes. I think it'll be interesting to see how these next couple weeks play out and what the Knicks are able to do to fill out their roster. They also have to keep a little bit of flexibility for potential trades during the season and all that. But we got an interesting nerd conundrum coming up with how they're gonna balance their cap sheet and all that, and then some interesting basketball coming up sooner than later to see how everything shakes out in preseason and what team the Knicks carry into the season. So we'll be here to report on all that for you and much more. But until next time, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace out, everybody.